Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming in and joining. I think it was good timing that we had this today, since the graduation guidance did come out, so that we can start taking a look at that. My name's Mayalise Tolan, and I'm I don't know what I am, the president-elect for OASSA, and I work in Lincoln County School District. Today's chat, we're going to just kind of continue on what we would have done last week, except for the technical difficulty, so we apologize for that. What we're going to be looking at is some brief conversation around graduation that we might go back and forth, because Morgan Allen is going to be able to come in and answer any questions that you might have, but he might be a little bit late, so we might have to flip back to that. And then we're going to look at distance learning for all as it pertains to kind of two different groups that people wanted to discuss. One, CTE and performance groups like Spanish, any of the world languages, and then we'll have some time to also talk about math. And it'll really be just open discussion on what are questions that you have around it that we might be able to support getting answers, and then what are ideas that you have that you can share. And then we'll end with looking at just some quick idea shares for Teacher Appreciation Week next week, and how people are looking at doing that in our new lovely screen environment. So without any kind of hesitation, I do want to start with a win. When Lee was our president, he always started with something great. There's a lot of us on here, so we won't have time for everybody, but if you've had something super cool happen in either personal or professional in the last couple weeks, or really, I don't care when it happened. If it was something good that happened to you, I just really like good stuff right now. So if you want to take a second just to share, that would be awesome. You can unmute yourself.
Come on, Lynn, you're always good for something positive.
No, I appreciate that. That's something that I start my management team meetings with every week. We call it good news. And so everyone is required to participate. So Mayalise is letting us off the hook a little bit easier this time. But good news, just as for me, I'd like to just express my appreciation to being a part of COSA and OASSA as my daughter continues to receive letters from various scholarships, some saying thank you, but we've gone a different direction. I've been just very happy to see a positive response come back and brighten her day. So that's good news. I'm excited to share that with her. So I haven't done so yet. So excited for that.
Great. I saw one just come up in the chat box too. So feel free if you want to put your win in the chat box, so we're not talking over each other. That's awesome. Taft had their second virtual information parent night last night. I know my daughter was happy to get her hydro flask. She learned how to request an item from the building out of that. So that was great. Thanks for adding that. Let's take two more. I'm going to put that pressure on it. Two more. Awesome, Lee. Thank you. What do you want to share?
Is there another Lee here?
Not right now.
With you, buddy.
Okay. So I have to share that distance learning for all is a very interesting environment right now. But I received a critique from my culinary teacher. One of his projects was to create a recipe for his family and have his mother and father critique them, and send a critique to my culinary teacher. He shared a critique with me that mom and dad went full savage mode, full Gordon Ramsay, and completely picked apart this kid's meal, even commenting that how in the world does a toothpick get in the middle of my hamburger patty? It was absolute gold, and really great that kids are out there trying things they're totally uncomfortable with, and families are doing their best to support their kids. And even though we all feel like this is a crazy world right now, it's fun to see some families really going forward and becoming closer as a result. So that was a win for us today.
Great.
I got something I can share. Yeah, so I'm at Centennial High School, and you know, we have been really promoting connections and having our teachers strategically call our kids at the high school and try and make connections with them, just to, do the social emotional stuff, but also start to connect them with Google Classroom, which is our main platform for connecting with kids during, this distance learning. And so, last Friday was our first kind of attendance, if you will, collecting information through the week, logging all the contacts, et cetera, et cetera. And so we ran the report Monday morning, and we came up with only 9 kids that missed all 7 periods of their schooling, which was a remarkable number. And I think it's a testament to our staff and making those calls and connecting with kids and getting them all set up and everything the last couple of weeks. And so this week, 4 of those 9 kids, we delivered Chromebooks to them to hopefully engage them this week and get them rolling so that they can connect. So that was a big victory for us.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. And there are a couple you guys can see in the chat too. So that's great. Thank you. So we're going to start with a poll. Chris is going to go ahead and put a poll in for us about graduation. There's been now an additional 2 weeks to think about it, and the guidance came out today. So we just want to kind of gather some information that we're able to share. If you could take a second and fill out the poll. Chris, is that the answer part, or is that where they can actually put their question in?
It is going.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Perfect.
We'll give them about 30 seconds, and then we'll end the poll and look at the information.
Great.
Okay, that looks like it's about everybody. So I'll share the results. Now,
Right.
Miley, can everybody see those results?
Can you guys see them? Thumbs up if you can see them. Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
So it looks like about 42% are looking at on campus prior to June 30th. 12% off campus prior to the 30th. We do have some virtual postponing through the summer. It's interesting, last time we met, there were some schools talking about how they were looking at holding it until the winter. And so we don't have any of those in that one. Can whoever clicked other, would someone share what some other ideas are with us?
Well, I think this is Lakeisha from Aloha High School in Beaverton. It's not so much other as it's a combination. We've been sort of, it sounds like we're going in a direction where we are trying to plan something like all 3, some sort of celebration in June, and then something for late July, either a virtual or in-person celebration. So.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions that people have, just kind of gauging where we're at with that?
I would say, Maya Elise, that I'm doing a combination as well. Many of the traditional aspects of our graduation ceremony are going to be posted virtually online with regards to our signing day, slideshow, those types of things. But in order to maintain this spacing and in order to maintain some type of reasonable time frame for the ceremony, we're going to have to eliminate some of those things because it's going to take us 2.5 hours just to get everybody through as they go through the procession, especially as we do not have an awards night this year. So we're kind of comboing those. So it's going to be very slow and methodical. So we had to eliminate some things and put those virtually while still trying to have the celebration prior to June 30th off campus.
Great.
And just to remind everyone, Miley's, the Department of Ed put out the new guidance regarding 2020 graduation and moving up ceremonies. I put a copy of it in the chat so you have access to it. And if you can't get it there, you can always go online to ODE's website and they have it linked. It came out today, so it's dated April 30th.
Great. And so so thank you for putting your information on that one. I think what we'll do right now, since Morgan's not here to really answer any of our questions, since he's been in those conversations, if you have questions for anybody who spoke or just consideration questions that your own districts come up with, if you want to put those in the chat box, then when Morgan does get out of his other meeting and can come in, we can make sure that we ask Morgan those questions, or if they're even for the rest of the group, we can come back and revisit those ones. Okay, and then the last thing that we had on that, with the guidance, it does say not necessarily surveying, but getting feedback from community, students, and parents. So if anybody has copies of how they've surveyed, it would be great if you were able to put some of that information in the chat so that we could gather a resource to help our members out as they figure out how to poll their communities and just get as much feedback as possible. I know in our community, the parent feedback has already changed just over the month from where they felt that they wanted to have the first month to where they're at with it now. So any information you have that you're willing to throw in the chat box for us to get feedback on would be great. Okay, as we shift now with that one, and we'll revisit graduation with Morgan there. One of the main focuses of this session was going to be on distance learning for all and some curriculum and grading questions. So we're going to go ahead and start looking at career tech, world languages. You can even add music, any of those really performance-based courses, and we'll start that with another poll. So Chris, if you want to put question number 2 up. So how do you plan on holding, oh, it's the same one, unless that's just my screen. There we go. No.
The results, realize poll. Okay, so what I'm looking for is how to, now, oh, there we go. Poll 2, got it. Launch the poll. How's that, Miley's?
All right. So how are your teachers assessing performance-based classes? So music, Spanish, CTE, how are they assessing any of those things?
Okay, that looks like that's about everybody who has voted. We have 43 of 60. Let's check out the results.
Okay, so video virtual assessment. I know this is another one that they can have multiple methods of how they were getting information. So I know, I'll speak really briefly about Lincoln County. I worked with the Spanish teachers, and there was a lot of anxiety that they had over the speaking component of how they were going to assess. They would be in the middle of having a conversation with students and somebody's call would drop, or they weren't able to get any of the audio or visual to work. And so we really talked a lot about how we go into a lot of these performance type courses because we love them. In any of our contents, we love them, but that language is something that we want them to love and not have anxiety about. So how can we kind of shift our thinking as a district around world language so that they are appreciating and enjoying it and not stressed out about the technology working or how they could get that feedback to them. But we want to go ahead and open it up for discussion. discussion. So what are some things that you have been doing in your district that you've seen teachers do that you can share or ask questions to?
I can share about our culinary program if you would like.
Great.
So at Taft, our CTE culinary program has both foods, and then it has the next extension, they take culinary. So our CTE teacher has kind of went in last week, prepared little bags with a tiny recipe. So last week was green beans. She put a handful portion of green beans, the onion or shallot, and then some butter, and then a little tiny pat of butter wrapped up, and then a recipe in that, and then bagged all those things up in her kitchen. We have a commercial kitchen on campus. And then she gave us our list. So through our pickup process at the school, we're able to distribute those little recipes so they could try them at home. And then they have, the Google Classroom platform where they can go in and do any assignment or any journal writing about how they made the green bean recipe. So it seemed to work out pretty good.
Great, thank you.
I would like to hear a little bit more from Principal Loving and Flip Grid. Principal Loving, could you expound upon that? Or anybody else who has familiarity with the program?
I don't have as much familiarity as my teachers do, Professor Jackson, but it's a really great way to exchange videos and be able to have students share out what they're doing in a live format that's recorded, obviously. And it just gave a lot of interactive pieces for our teachers to be able to not only see the kids, which is fun for their souls and good for their souls, but to see the performance-based pieces that they would not be able to have under many other technological basis.
So for those who don't know, I use Flipgrid as well for our Spirit Days this last couple of months. And it's not a live thing. They record themselves. So then other kids can see other kids' recordings, or you can set it up where only you see them.
Thank you. 3A Josh, and I don't want to say your last name incorrectly, so I'm just not going to say it. Can you speak to what you just put in the chat about the auto and welding classes?
Well, I know that with our autos and welding that they had done a good portion of their curriculum that was the non-shop part at the beginning of the year. And so that was one of the challenges. And I'll have to look up what the exact curriculum is, but there is some online resources that Clatsop Community College has been using with their autos and welding classes. And we are collaborating with them so our students can have some access to that curriculum. And then we're actually, I think, using some of our Perkins money to purchase the online version of that for future use as needed. So I'll get that information and put that in the chat room.
Great, thank you. Open it up to see if there's any other questions. All right, we will go ahead and switch then to kind of the conversation around what we're going to be doing with math. Math was another one, and for this one, we want to make sure we're also getting really getting feedback on how we can be able to support you as we look through kind of the math lens and where we're headed with that. So Chris, I think we have, is the next question around math?
It is.
All right.
Poll 3, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'll launch the group. Can you see it, Miley?
Yep. So how are teachers supporting math standards? Are they finishing the remainder of the year with standards expectations? So whatever they had left, they're going to pump through all of that. Adjusting to just a couple essential learning standards. focus on really deep understanding of what they've done, or is there something else that they're looking at? All right, I think we're probably pretty good.
Okay. There you go. There's the results.
Great. So the adjusting to 2 to 3 standards, I'll go ahead and kind of kick it off to start, and then we'll open it up for people to have a conversation, is what we've looked at in Lincoln County. And one of our areas of real conversation right at this point is making sure that we support the teachers with time so that they can look at next year's curriculum, especially if we're finding that we have a number of students who are going to walk into next year with an incomplete already in that course, that we need to know that we've been able to fill that gap, and how we're going to be able to look at a group of students that could be all over the board with how much they actually did. What did a pass mean? And did the pass mean enough that the class is going to then be in lots of different places? So really being aware of that with math for our staff, and having them work together for what that kind of new alignment of next year's math courses would look like. But we definitely want to open this up for your conversation about what your teachers are doing, or the conversations you've had so far around math.
I can speak. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, we're one of the 18% that's trying to push through. And our teachers are creating, for instance, 80 videos already in 30-minute segments, and trying to, if those that can finish. We just, with our small school, we just couldn't wrap our head around those that don't finish and how to accommodate them next year. We're thinking that we're going to need all these certain support classes, and we only have 2.5 teachers in math. So that was our philosophy. Well, let's see if we can't push along and then assess at the end of the year, and then offer summer, possibly offer an accelerated course in August, as well as do a little review in September, and see if we can't get folks caught up. The other thing is, if we're really behind the assessments that we made a mistake, that we shouldn't have went that way, do we move from a semester to a trimester approach, which isn't a great option for a superintendent, but it's one option. So we're pushing along. I don't know if that helps or not.
Oh, thank you. I think any ideas we can share are great.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, is ideas.
So we're moving forward to a degree with those classes that are dual credited. So we kind of have to keep those essential learnings in conjunction with our community college. However, I have been very pleased. My mathematics PLC is probably functioning at the highest level I've ever seen them function at, with regards to, okay, we missed this standard, we'll pick this up on the front end of trig. If you missed it in algebra 2, those types of conversations are happening right now, which has been a silver lining that has emerged from this closure, is the effectiveness of our PLCs have actually really ratcheted up.
You know, as we're talking right now, I was just thinking it would have been great. I should have invited the math team. I was wondering if that might be an option, that maybe by league or something, that we have smaller PLCs. You know, Lynn, you just made me think of it. I wonder if we can't learn a little bit from you. if we can't form something that allows our math teachers to get together along with the administrators and brainstorm this.
Well, Joe, that there's nothing that prevents us in a future meeting from doing kind of a breakout room model where people who are here want to talk about math. We could assign them to a room in math, and they could go and have 20-minute conversation and then come back and report out. So we could consider that for sure.
Yeah, if that's the kind of thing that you're wanting, definitely put those ideas in the chat, even if you see somebody else put it in there, so we can look at different options. You know, COSA supports a literacy conference, and there's no reason right now we can't help support virtually getting some teams together and kind of helping make that possible for them while they're all navigating this together. So anything you're wanting support in, even if we can't do it, we can help try to find it. Stacy, do you want to ask your question, or I can?
Sure. I just, we started having some conversations this morning with a rural schools group that I'm in. And the discussion was trying to get all of our technology back and trying to get the kids who are having incompletes caught up before they leave, because, you know, 2 months from now, they're not going to remember what they've been learning anyway. So we talked about maybe wrapping up our new instruction by about June 1st, spending those last 2 weeks really intensely focusing on the kids with incompletes, and collecting back the computers from those kids who are pretty much met expectations and are done. That way we can stagger when they're turning things in, as well as the extra effort that our teachers are going to have to put out to get in contact with those incompletes and help those kids get done. So, you know, with all this technology going out, we also are going to need to do a lot of maintenance over the summer on it. So we want to make sure that we catch it before kids disappear over the summer.
Yeah, great point. Appreciate those comments.
Stacy, what are you guys thinking as far as the kids who are done? If they're not having to complete an incomplete, what does their chunk of time between June 1st and the end of the school year look like for a particular course?
It could be optional projects. It could be, congratulations, you did a great job. We did not have weeks off in between when we closed school and when we started instruction. We went straight online like over the weekend. So for them, they're not missing any more instruction than anyone at these other schools that didn't launch it until later. It'll be equivalent.
Gotcha, thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat here. How many, it's not a poll question, but if you want to kind of just jump in and give us some thoughts on the summer school, like an August summer school component for any of the incompletes or math especially. Is that something that's on people's radar? I see it in the group chat.
We've thought about it, but we're trying not to make too many plans until we know what the heck things are going to look like down the road. And everything is so up in the air that right now it's just a sticky note idea on the wall, and we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
I know Morgan's here and he may be able to shed light on this, but I have it planned, but at the same time, a lot of my supports in that realm have come from Measure 98 monies, and that's a pretty uncertain world right now. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have the funds to carry out some of the interventions that I would wish to do.
Great. I see in the chat focusing more on 7th and 9th grade transitions that had to be canceled. So great. Thank you. I do think that kind of leads us back over, and we can come back to this part. We do have another question, but while we have Morgan, and we did have quite a few comments, questions around graduation, and Morgan might be able to give us a little information about 98, or we'll hear May 20th. But Morgan, do you want to go ahead and jump in?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I will talk about graduation first, and then I can take a couple minutes and some questions on, I'll talk just briefly about the budget and take questions about that. But I think the The good news is, because of this group's prodding and other folks, we've been sharing with Colton, the Department of Education, that our high school principals in particular are very anxious about knowing what they can and cannot do to honor and celebrate seniors this year, given the circumstances. It won't come as a surprise to anyone on this Zoom that sort of anything resembling the traditional, get a few hundred people together or a few thousand people together at the county fairgrounds or the high school gym, all those kinds of close quarters types things are out the window. But hopefully you all got a copy of this from Chris today. The Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority did put out some guidance and sideboards around high school graduations based on several questions that we and other school districts had submitted about sort of what's possible. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised with the results. And we don't have a lot of pleasant surprises under the current circumstances. But in particular, if you haven't had a chance to read through the document, one of the big takeaways for me was on page 2, that if you want to have small group in-person graduation ceremonies or other things honoring seniors, you can do it as long as you don't have more than 25 people and you're keeping the social distancing requirements, and encouraging people to wear masks and make sure you're sanitizing items. The other one, there were a couple specific questions where people were looking for creative ways to do sort of drive-through graduation ceremonies at county fairgrounds or football fields, and those types of scenarios were specifically responded to on pages 3 and 4. And again, there's sideboards on it, but I think there's a lot more space to do those types of things than I thought we would get back officially. And I told Chris earlier last week, my concern was reading the executive orders and the proclamations about how, playgrounds are closed, parks are closed. A lot of the alternative sites probably would not be open before the month of June was over. I think this is probably the best we could possibly get as far as guidance goes. I hope that it gives you guys some space to work and get creative. We also know a lot of people are doing things virtually, pre-taping things and doing virtual ceremonies, but particularly if you're a smaller to medium-sized district, you really could get creative and do kind of the drive-through ceremonies. I know that like Tillamook is planning on doing that. They're going to use the fairgrounds and set up a podium and have families drive through in a car with like a maximum of the student plus 2 or 3 people. The drive-in ceremonies, people that are lucky to have a defunct drive-in or a big field are going to try to do some things like that where people come in. But like I said, really very pleasantly surprised. And I think, other than there's really a lot of room here to do things that are creative. I also know that some districts have talked about putting it off till August. I believe Salem-Kaiser, for example, has proposed essentially doing the traditional type cap and gown, large assemblage graduation ceremonies in August. So you can get creative about that too. I do think if you're thinking about that, I still feel like we've had some presentations this week about forthcoming how Oregon's going to essentially reopen the state and the economy. And I still have a lot of doubts that even by August, getting 1,000 people in a gymnasium is going to be allowed. And if it is, like, there'll be social distancing requirements that are impossible to get that many people in a gym and things like that. So I'll stop there about graduation ceremonies. I think the document's pretty self-explanatory. And I can either take a couple questions or we can talk about the budget a little bit.
Well, I want to get Morgan to weigh in on a couple of the questions that are coming up in the chat. So there's a bit of confusion about the notion of having an in-person regular ceremony with, say, 200 people, as long as they're 6 feet apart, or saying if it's going to be regular, typical ceremony in person, it cannot be more than 25. So looking at it, there's a big difference between driving up and in person. So let's get Morgan to weigh in on that just a little bit for us, because several people had questions about that.
Yeah, if there's one thing I need to follow up on, it does seem to say a couple different things in the document. If you look at page 2, it says if districts choose to hold small group no more than 25 if able to maintain 6-foot distance between participants. And then I think it's on page 4 where it says the executive order prohibits gathering of more than 25 if the physical distancing of a minimum of 3 people cannot be maintained, and the OHA recommends a physical distance of 3 feet. So, I think, the one follow-up question, if you'd like me to follow up on, is does that mean you could put like 100 people in a gym if you had the space to socially distance them? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I could certainly follow up on that.
Okay, great. And then the second thing I thought was important.
Wait.
Go ahead, Joe.
So my thought on that is I think it's kind of clear. I wouldn't ask for clarification because we might get an answer we don't want.
What do you think is clear, Joe?
I think that if we can maintain appropriate distance, we can have a larger group. It states that pretty clearly on page 4 when it asks that question, prohibits gatherings of more than 25 people if physical distance of a minimum 3 feet, people cannot be maintained. So if you can maintain that minimum distance, you can have a larger setting.
Yeah, I think, the question is, if you start talking about more than a few dozen people, can you realistically maintain social distancing? I don't know. I would be a little bit, I'd have to go back and look, read the exact executive order, but I did notice that inconsistency, and my assumption was someone just misstated that, because it says no more than 25. And then I think that's a mistake, probably. So it probably is worth clarifying.
All right.
We'll probably want to do a little checking for you, Joe, because we don't want to get you in trouble.
Well, if it's just going to be a slap out of the hand, maybe I'll take it.
And so just to follow up on that point, to know that this type of stuff is a serious matter. The mayor of Oregon City was opining online about reopening Oregon City before the governor's order, or sort of doing things outside the stay-at-home orders, and got a cease and desist. Basically, I will arrest you and prosecute you from the Attorney General. So, Joe, we don't want you to get a letter from the Attorney General threatening to.
Yeah, let's get some clarification on that question.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the second thing that's in the notice today was around equal access. So the statement reads, districts must consider provisions for families that do not have access to a vehicle or cannot afford to operate a vehicle at this time. So if you were going to, as our poll survey indicated, about 87% of you were looking at doing something in June that might resemble a drive-up event, and I know that's kind of what Lynn is planning. It seems to me that you as a district need to be considering right now those families that could not get there without some form of transportation. It looks like it's the district's responsibility to ensure they have that access.
Yeah, I know in Tillamook, Kurt Shelley had worked out a deal with, I think, one of the local car dealerships or rental places where they would let people borrow cars. But hopefully that's not a huge issue for people.
And I know, parents, I think you put something about that regarding the Centennial situation, correct?
There was a question about it up earlier, how people were going to do it.
Okay. All right, well, we'll let Morgan jump to his other topics then.
Great.
So just very briefly, I know people have a lot of questions about the budget, so I'll try to run through some stuff real quickly. So the major things that are happening or will happen, on May 20th, the state's going to get a new revenue forecast. But the governor has taken some preemptive action, as you've probably seen, and ordered state agencies to make what are called allotment reductions, or plan for allotment reductions, which basically is the same as across the board cuts. The governor has statutory authority to order across the board reductions to programs that are funded by the general fund, which would include programs run by ODE and ODE itself, and things like the state school fund or ballot measure 98 funding. And what they are assuming is that the May revenue forecast is going to show about a $1.8 billion shortfall in general fund revenues compared to current projected expenditures for the rest of the biennium. And so that's equivalent to about an 8.5% reduction to the state school funds. And so she's ordering, in fact, an 8.5% reduction to all general funded programs to cover that hole. The most important takeaway from that is this is the very first step in a long process. It is her effort to elevate the conversation about the severity of Oregon's revenue crunch that we're expected to see on May 20th. And she has said she's going to call the legislature into special session sometime, we're thinking now June or perhaps even later, depending on the social distancing and other challenges, but to call into the legislature to have a conversation about accessing reserve funds in the Education Stability Fund, the State Rainy Day Fund, and potentially to reprioritize expenditures. So, for example, Craig and I were on a call today with the leadership of OEA, OSEA, and OSBA to talk about how we can work together collectively to advocate to protect the state school fund and protect services and programs for our most vulnerable students, to protect Measure 98 investments. Because for any of you that were in Oregon in 2008 during the last recession, at that time the state did not have reserves, really functionally had no reserves. But in the Education Stability Fund and the Rainy Day Funds, the state's estimated to have somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion that they can tap into to cover losses. So an 8.5% reduction to the state school fund is the equivalent of $655 million roughly. So that's what the governor's allotment reduction will store. But we have a tremendous opportunity and are going to spend all of our advocacy capital on trying to get that entire reduction replaced by the legislature, either through the rainy day funds or through reprioritizing expenditures. It gets a little bit more complicated because the state school fund, which is $9 billion, is also funded by the corporate activity tax, by the lottery, by marijuana taxes. So of that $9 billion, about $1.3 billion comes from those other sources. And we also expect the lottery proceeds to take a hit because obviously bars and restaurants are closed. Nobody's playing video poker. Nobody's buying scratch-its. And we also expect the corporate activity tax at that revenue forecast to show a pretty significant reduction, somewhere in the neighborhood probably of 40 to maybe as high as 60%. So that means that it's very likely there's going to be very little to no student investment account during the 2021 school year, which is really hard to sort of comprehend that we've gone, in less than a year from heading into the greatest funding cycles in Oregon school history to potentially some of our most challenging funding cycles. So that's kind of where we're at. So nothing by the governor ordering agencies to prepare allotment reductions. Those cuts can be adjusted by the legislature. And so I don't want anyone to walk away thinking, oh, we're going to take the equivalent of really a 17% cut to our state school fund next year, because that, when you compound that 8.5% cut, that's to the total appropriation for the biennium. But obviously this school year is almost over, so all those cuts would have to come in the second year if she just ordered them and the legislature did not. So now that I've thoroughly confused you with my budget explanation, I'd be happy to answer questions. But I think the one thing I really want you to take away is it is frustrating, it's disappointing. I'll even say for me, it's a little bit depressing. I've lain awake several nights thinking about how can we close this hole. But we do have a big opportunity, and it's very likely that the legislature is going to step in and open up the reserves at a significant level to try to protect K-12.
I don't want to jump in and be like the COSA kiss up, but I think going into this realm that we're in, if COSA hadn't done so much work building relationships with OSBA and OEA and all of the organizations to get Oregon Rising going to where we have so much feedback from every major group you can possibly think of across the state of Oregon to go into this, really supporting the importance of K-12 education. I think you guys have done a great job, and I really appreciate how much effort you have put into the budget to get it to where it is right now, and then hopefully we can use that collectively moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, well, at least I think there's a time to jump into the third polling question if you want to go there.
No, I think we're going to skip the polling question. Are there any other questions for Morgan?
Just one thing, it looks like there's another Morgan, which is not a everyday occurrence when there's multiple Morgans on a call, but it looks like.
Yeah, I kept waiting to jump in with, oh, never mind.
Yeah, it looks like you might have actually pulled up the executive order real quickly and read it, and it looks like my assumption that that was a mistake is correct, that it is really no more than 25, even if you socially distance. Thank you. I'll take that off my to-do list. Thank you, fellow Morgan.
Yeah, Chris, I think we'll skip that last polling question and just, we're at, we've had 45 minutes so far, to just get a quick idea share using either the group chat, or if you want to speak out about what you're doing next week, on that happy note with money. How are we going to show our teachers who are working so hard right now some appreciation next week? So if you want to throw your ideas in the group chat, or I'll be quiet and you can unmute yourself and share out some ideas with us, that'd be great.
This is Heidi Buckmaster from Nia County School District. We're going to do yard signs similar to what lots of districts are doing for their seniors, but we're going to sneak around and put them in staff yards, just saying that we appreciate them, and even from a distance, we're making a difference.
I'm sending a quote on a magnet with a card about sticking through distance learning. I can't remember all the wording, but it made a funny reference to the magnet sticking, and we're doing that through the mail. We're a very rural district, and our staff is spread even more broad, so we talked about maybe doing yard signs, but it felt a little disjointed just with where our staff are, so we're just doing something through the mail.
I see in the chat highlighting a department a day next week on social media. Social media spotlights about staff, encouraging staff or students and community to share. It's great. Goodie bags delivered to schools or to homes. All right. You can keep putting them in there. Chris, do you want to kind of close us up with thoughts for the next session?
Our next scheduled session is on next Thursday, May 7th. So we're going to take a little bit of time here to solicit ideas for discussion. We can either build upon the kind of academic interventions discussion we had today and maybe do some breakout rooms, or we can choose some other topics. So I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes here to enter your information into the chat about the type of topics that you'd be interested in talking about next week. And as you're doing that, I'll try to answer some of the things that are coming up. So Sarah Bean at Malala is asking about Seaside. That is a decision that will be made probably at the beginning of next week, Sarah. So Colin and Craig and others are in consultation with leadership here and COSA leadership, and they'll make that decision, and they'll get information out to everybody about what Seaside will or will not look like probably early next week.
while you're filling that in there, we do have a new K-12 principal Twitter chat that's been going for 2 weeks now. It's on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock. I saw the question about virtual burnout, and that was our topic last week. Had to do with some of that. One principal had put in that she is explicitly stopping meetings and telling the staff, now you need to get up and go look outside the window for a minute. And I thought that was a great idea. So next week we're looking at topics on how we still have to move forward. So while we're in the middle of this crisis, we also have to be looking at what does next year look like, just with little things. So that'll be next week. It's at 7 o'clock, and the hashtag is COSA Prin Chat. I can put it in the chat here. Oh, thanks, COSA. All right. Well, you feel free. We can leave the chat up for a minute to put things in. Thank you so much. I hope that you have a good rest of your night, a nice Friday, and be well. Thank you.
Thanks, Miley.
Mm-hmm.